Joining us right now is our Squawk Newsmaker of the Morning, one of the candidates seeking the Democratic nomination for president, Tom Steyer, who is the founder of Next Gen America and Farallon Capital Management. And Tom, it's good to see you.
Becky, it's nice to talk to you.
So, Tom, why are you running for president?
Well, I'm running for president because we have a broken government in Washington, D.C. Because this government, there's been a hostile corporate takeover of this government. And if we're going to, in fact, meet any of the needs of the American people, we're going to have to restore our democracy, get back to government of, by, and for the people. And it's urgent. That's why I'm running, Becky. Somebody's got to do the job.
Hey, Tom, I think about some other high-profile business leaders who have looked at running either for the Democratic nomination or as an independent. Howard Schultz, who now says he's taking a detour, at least for his path. And Mayor Bloomberg, who I think looked at it and didn't see a clear path for election. Why do you think, as a business leader, you could make that case and actually get elected?
Well, I think two things, Becky. First of all, for the last 10 years, I've been putting together coalitions of ordinary American citizens to take on unchecked corporate power, and we've been winning. So I have been doing this successfully as an outsider in the political system for 10 years. Second of all, I believe that it's going to be important for whatever Democrat is the nominee to know a lot about the economy, to be able to take on Mr. Trump on the economy. And you have known me for over a decade. I'm somebody who built a business from scratch into a big international business. I've thought a lot about it, and I believe I can expose Mr. Trump as the failure he was as a business person and as the failure he has been as the leading economic policymaker in the United States. So I think actually I'm the person who has the history of doing what's important as an outsider and the person who has the skill set to take on Mr. Trump successfully on the economy.
Hey, Tom, as a billionaire and as a businessman, there is probably a large chunk of your party that thinks that that's going to disqualify you. You're somebody who has taken advantage of the capitalist system, and there are a lot of people in your party who think that capitalism has a big problem. Why do you think that you're going to be able to go up against that, just realizing some of the things that are happening in the Democratic Party right now?
Well, I do think there's a problem with business in the United States, Becky, and that's this. Business has decided it can take over government and has successfully done so. If you take a look at what's happened over the last 40 years, the business community has been able to write the rules for itself on how it's going to operate. You take a look at exactly what's happened in terms of distribution of income around this country, and you can see that for 40 years, the vast bulk of Americans haven't gotten a raise. That's 2 generations. That's never happened before. So there is a problem with business, which is business is not supposed to be the prime, controller of the American government. The American people are. And that's something which I think it is urgent for us to redress. And I think that I'm the person to do it because I've successfully been taking them on for 10 years.
Tom, maybe it's a business question, but how do you feel about deficits? How do you feel about balancing the budget? Clearly, the budget and the deficit has continued to increase.
Well, if you take a look at the Republican Trump tax plan that they pushed through, that was a gigantic giveaway to corporations and the richest Americans who own and run those corporations. So when you talk about the deficit, what you're looking at is a starving of the government for revenues and a huge giveaway to the richest Americans. And that's something where, as a result, the Republicans are now saying, oh, we can't afford to invest in Americans. We can't afford to invest in education.
But so many people in the Democratic,
but Tom,
so many people in the Democratic Party are now talking about spending even more, whether it's the Green New Deal or all sorts of other priorities. And there doesn't seem to be any attention on balancing a budget.
Listen, it is the idea that Republicans are talking about being deficit hawks is laughable. The truth of the matter is there's been a systematic attempt over 40 years to make sure that rich people in the United States and corporations in the United States can hang on to much more of their income than they had before. And as a result, people are now talking about the deficit which Mr. Trump and the Republicans created. I find that honestly laughable. The truth of the matter is we need a government that can pay for itself. We need a government that understands that investing in the American people is how we're going to succeed. This is an administration that doesn't know anything about economics, that is dangerous for the American people and is really threatening our prosperity. So I have no problem in saying that there's no question here about who's created this deficit and now who's trying to sit here and act high and mighty. The Republican Party has walked away from fiscal competence and fiscal conservatism.
Tom, the geographic center of the party now, if people like Elizabeth Warren, the senator, or Bernie Sanders and others, I think they'd have a problem with your corporate background. I mean, you're Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, hedge fund, and it was a system that allowed you to make billions of dollars, which is why you're on CNBC right now, really, and running for president. But they're also going to have a problem with some of the investments you made at Farallon. Here's an LA Times piece. Tom Steyer's bets on private prisons and coal mining could spell trouble in 2020. More troublesome for Steyer's public image is the fund's history of investing in fossil fuel projects, including a giant coal mine in Australia, generates vast quantities of carbon emissions. The owners overcame protests by environmentalists and won permission to clear 3,700 acres of forest that served as a koala habitat and mine 12 million tons of coal per year. Steyer's critics have long seen his past personal stake in coal mining as hypocritical. So, I mean, koalas, Tom, you move the koalas out?
Listen, when we were at Farallon, we invested in every part of the economy, including fossil fuels. And over a decade ago, I realized that the consequences of that were a threat to the safety and health of Americans. I divested from all of those. I took the Giving Pledge. And for 10 years, I've been working as an environmentalist to take on the oil and gas companies and to make sure that actually what we're doing in terms of climate change is responsible. I'm the person who would declare climate change a national emergency on day one of my presidency.
I saw your
so what I'm
interview
asking
last night.
Americans to do,
Tommy,
what I'm asking Americans, hang on, what I'm asking Americans to do is to do exactly what I did myself,
but how are
which
you
is to understand that we're coming from a fossil fuel environment, a fossil fuel economy, that there are unintended consequences of that that are a threat to us, and that we change and move to a clean economy.
Why would the
I've
Democrats
been doing that for a decade,
why would the
and that is
Democrats-
exactly what I've been asking other people to do.
Why would the Democrats want to nominate someone when climate change is so front and center that they have a 7-hour town hall meeting with all the baggage that you have? Why would they nominate you to take that on when they can have someone I mean, even Jay Inslee, he was at least an elected official. He was a governor of Washington. He ran on climate change. He's no longer in the race.
Because I am the person who has been working on climate change most successfully for over a decade. Because I'm the person who actually has been taking on the oil companies at the ballot box and beating them. I'm the person who's been taking on the utilities at the ballot box and beating them. I'm the person who actually closed a corporate tax loophole for $1 billion and used it up to retrofit schools on an energy basis. So, in fact, if you look at the record for the last 10 years, I'm the person who has done this. And my plan is the one that recognizes on day one the timing that's necessary and the need to declare this a state of emergency to protect the health and safety of every American. So if you actually go to the videotape and take a look and see who's been successful, who's been on top of it, and who's been leading, actually, it's me.
Okay, so Tom, what do you need to do to actually get into that? I mean, you're in the conversation, but you're not nearly at the top of the polls where you're going to ultimately need to be to make any of this work.
Near 1%.
So the question is, what do you have to do to get there?
Actually, if you take a look at the places where I'm spending my time right now, I'm calling you from New Hampshire. You'll see that in the 4 early primary states, if you look at the polls, I'm between 6 and 7%, and I'm either in 4th or 5th place. I've been in this race for 6 or 7 weeks, not 6 or 7 months. So if you actually look at the places where I'm talking to people and where my message is getting out, I'm actually moving very well, and people are very receptive to it. So in fact, if you take a look at the facts, you'll find out that what I have to say and the message that I'm bringing about a corporate takeover of our government, the need for climate emergency, and my experience in economics and my ability to expose Mr. Trump for the fake that he is and the fraud that he is something that Americans are responding to very well.
Tom, are you walking the walk now? How'd you get to New Hampshire? Are you living a fossil fuel-free life right now? How'd you get to New Hampshire? You take a commercial flight, a private flight? How'd you get there?
Of course, I took a commercial flight. I don't fly on private planes.
Okay, all right, but you did take a commercial.
Just so you know,
yeah.
And in fact, I don't know whether you guys have done this, but I've taken a look at my carbon footprint, and I have a carbon footprint which I have a huge experiment in resequestering carbon into the ground at our ranch. So when you ask me about what I'm doing, I've thought it through. I've had more than a decade to figure out how to divest from all this stuff. I've had a decade to figure out how we can do this in a way that will make America richer, will make us grow faster, it will raise wages, it will create 46 million jobs over 10 years, 4.6 million on average per year, and it will make us much healthier. So when we talk about the move away from fossil fuels, this isn't a question about hurting the economy or destroying jobs. This is a question about us being better off, richer, more prosperous as a result of doing the right thing.
Tom, where do you think the economy stands right now?
Look, I think we can all see signs that the economy is weakening as a result of this trade war. I think that Mr. Trump's attempt to use tariffs to bludgeon other countries into doing what we want is a signal failure. I think that what he's doing across the board economically shows that he doesn't understand what really drives American prosperity. This is a guy who's trying to cut American research and development. This is a guy who doesn't believe in educating American citizens. When you want the way that we prosper, our country is driven by the success of American citizens and our ability to innovate and do new things and create good-paying jobs. I don't think he understands one part of that. I think he's living in the past, and I think that his trade policy is a failure. I think his tax policy is a signal failure, and I think that what he's trying to do shows more and more that he doesn't understand what's going on in the 21st century.
If you think the economy is in trouble right now, do you think the Fed should act to cut rates more rapidly than they've signaled to this point?
Look, let me say this. Mr. Trump's attempt to take political control of the Fed is something which has, for the last century, been something American presidents have avoided. The independence of the Fed is a critical part of our success. So regardless of what the Fed does, the big point here is that Mr. Trump is trying to every single lever he can think of to bail himself out between now and November 2020 to try and to stay in power. And that's something which he realistically, it's wrong for him to be doing. I'm not surprised he's doing it. But in the long run, what we need to do is get back to the kind of prosperity that Americans have always looked for, which means broad-based prosperity, where we're investing in the American people and we're doing the things that really create growth and jobs and shared income across society.
Tom, I want to thank you for your time. Tom Steyer, again, is one of the candidates seeking the Democratic nomination for president.